time now for our discussion zone. And like I said, we're talking matters regarding widows. Today is International Widows Day, very important day for that matter. And my colleagues are here so we can talk about it. Very important day, International Widows Day. So, yeah, I mean, we know how it is, especially with women on the continent and elsewhere across the globe, challenges they actually faced with, and this is the case where their partners, their spouses, husbands that they're supposed to be protected by, go to, they're no more. So it means that there's a problem here, because if you're already vulnerable, even as a wife to someone, or you're less privileged in that regard, how much more when your partner is no longer with you? That's another big challenge. Okay, so International Day for widows, often left without saving or any other, what do you call it, income supports. Widows have been especially exposed to the sudden loss of employment during the pandemic, creating immediate and acute financial vulnerability. Now, with serious consequences that range from food insecurity to increased, what do you call it? To increase, they're prone to human trafficking and other, issues surrounding them. Now, millions of widows across the world battle for critical issues: poverty, violence, health, and conflict related situations. According to the UN, despite the fact that there are more than 258 million widows around the world, widows have historically been left unseen, unsupported, and unmeasured in our society. So definitely this brings to the table the conversation surrounding widows. Like I said, even when you're not even a widow, you're vulnerable, you're less empowered. How much more there's nothing, or there's no one to run to. My colleagues are here, Epi and Hafiz. Let me start with Hafiz. Hafiz,
Hey,
it's International Day for widows. Today is the day one would say, let's celebrate them, because you can't take out the fact that some of them, in as much as they are caught up in this dire situation, they try to do their best, to fend for the family, for themselves, and even others, and it's not an easy spot
to be in.
to be in, actually, right.
Yeah, International Widows Day.
Mm.
Yes, essentially a day that, emphasizes the need to have better opportunities for widows.
Right.
So, all in all, that's just what it is.
Mm.
But let's look at, being a widow. I mean, losing your partner as a woman
Mm.
is hard enough.
Right.
And this loss is amplified greatly when
Mhm.
when you are subjected to all kinds of inhumane treatment,
Mm.
treatment that is considered less than human.
Right.
Yes, just so you can prove that you are innocent or something,
Mhm.
and and all this while you are grieving,
Mm.
and afterwards you are left to fend for yourself,
Mhm.
and with little or no support at all.
Mm.
I mean, these stories are endless.
Mhm.
We hear it all the time.
Mm.
Now, we've seen that in the widows in some cultures,
Mm.
or in many cultures across the globe,
Mm.
uh, we've seen that every now and then they are expected, or some of them are even forced to undertake certain cleansing rituals.
Okay.
Yes, to either say they are innocent of it, because, well, widows, for a lot of them,
Mm.
are usually or regularly accused of killing their husbands,
Yep.
either deliberately or through neglect.
Mm.
So, once your husband dies,
Mm.
you are expected to step up and
Prove your
prove your
innocence.
innocence,
Mm.
because per the laws you are guilty. Now, that's the customary law.
Yeah, right.
A lot of them, you are guilty. Now, the thing about these laws is that, you see, when you go through these rites, or whatever it is they call it, you are in trouble.
Mm.
And if you don't go through them,
You're in trouble.
you are in trouble. How?
No way out.
In some rites, for example, in some rites, when when you lose your husband, you are expected to sleep with a stranger to prove your innocence.
Mm.
Now, in this case, you do that, you are exposing yourself to STIs.
Mhm.
If you don't, you get condemned by the society you find yourself in
As guilty.
as guilty.
Right.
So there's no way you're winning. Okay, there's no way you are winning.
Mm.
So either way, you
Mm.
still have trouble.
Right.
Now, the thing about it is that let's come to even the concept of death for most of these societies.
Mm.
Death is never seen as something natural or biological.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
for them it is something bigger.
Right.
Okay, so it is never just a case of someone is the end of life. That's it. Let's go on with our lives. No,
Right. Mm.
because to them
There's
death
more. There's
death
more
is
to
an
one's
anomaly.
death.
Yes, and so you ask yourself, why do these widowhood rights continue? And that is where it starts from. That's where the conversation starts from.
Mm.
Because I've read in certain cultures, if you take the Balengu for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for them, it's a group in Cameroon, an ethnic group in Cameroon somewhere.
Okay.
Now, the thing about some of these cultures is that long after a person dies,
Okay.
the belief is that the spirit of this person lingers. It's still very much around and has an impact on the living.
Okay.
Yes. And so the corpse here, for some time, is still kept around, just so the family can run around and mobilize resources and give the deceased, a proper sending off. So that is why, and it is there for just for some months, sometimes yes, a lot of weeks we hear, just so they can give the person a proper sending off.
Mm.
Now, how do they do that properly? That is where they observe some of these rites.
Okay.
Just so to them, if it's not done, the deceased cannot be granted access into the next life or into the spiritual realm.
Wow.
So these rites have to be done and properly done, that is,
Mm.
so that the person can be granted access into the next life.
Mm-hmm.
So a widow is seated, grieving in all of this. She doesn't want to undertake some of these rites.
Mm-hmm.
But then here's a culture that tells her that when you don't do it, your husband or the deceased will not be granted access into the next life. So
And you believe that theory?
well, that's it.
Yeah.
So she avails herself to some of these things,
Mm.
not because she wants to, but because, well, she feels if I don't do it, my husband.
Will not be granted eternal rest.
Exactly.
Mm.
So she avails herself to some of these things.
Right.
I remember one woman recounting her experience. For her, in the process of grieving, I think one time she had a dream
Okay.
and she saw her husband, who's now deceased, and the husband was like, in the dream that is, that he's not happy.
Okay.
And so this woman woke up, freaked out by the situation,
Mm.
decided to inform her brother-in-law about it. The brother-in-law went to a soothsayer,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest they say is history. And that was where it started, where they decided to bring her in to undertake all kinds of funny rituals,
Okay.
just so they can ward off the spirits of, or to appease the spirits of the husband. So to them, in this culture, you find that yes, they feel the dead and the living are still in some ways connected.
Mm.
That tie or that link is only going to be severed when these rituals take place or these rites take place.
Right.
So that's one reason why you find some of these very, I won't say interesting, but very, complicated stuff going on in terms of
Right.
rites
Mm.
involving women. Now, another reason people do this, you find that sometimes the woman is subjected to all kinds of inhumane treatment. She's asked to drink the water,
That was used to bathe
to
the
bathe the
husband.
corpse and all kinds of funny things. And she's doing all this. Why? Because this dehumanizing experience. Well, according to this culture, their culture, this dehumanizing experience she goes through is meant to make her unattractive to her late husband. Because so long as her spirit is around, she won't be able to find joy in the next husband that she meets. So, in this culture, it's also telling her
That's
that
the belief.
it's not just about giving the husband a proper sending off, but also it's for your own good. If you don't do it,
allowing the spirit to go rest so
Exactly.
you can move on with your
because
new
if
man
not, no suitor will come
for you.
for you.
Right.
So you have all these things going on, and anyway, so
Right. The show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. Today we're observing International Widows Day. And yeah, like I said, a difficult place to find one in. Because already, most women in different societies, the vulnerables there and all of that stuff and everything. And here's the case: you lose your spouse, your husband, and then another, mystery matter steps in again. Let me hear Epi's take here. Epi,
Hi, Barry.
it's another day
Mm-hmm.
marking another very sensitive
Hmm.
conversation. Widows. It's the
Yeah,
day to day.
it is. It's a very important day, and I
Mm.
think it's something we need to keep looking at
Mm.
most of the time. And I think there was a time we actually had a show where we spoke to a couple of people, and some people from the Widows and Orphans movement here in Ghana,
Okay.
and they threw light on some of these issues. Now, it's interesting to note that globally you have about 258 million widows around the world.
Yeah.
And painfully, out of that number, out of 10, one of them is going to be living in extreme poverty.
Mm.
And even when you go to DR Congo, here in our, Africa, our continent, you have about 50% of the women there being widows. That tells you a lot. Now, these women are not done fighting for their basic human rights.
Right.
And then one person, the person who is like a green card,
Mm.
that enables them to live in the society
Mm-hmm.
with some amount of respect, and that helps them and keeps them, is actually leaves them.
Mm.
It tells you the kind of conditions they put themselves through, they go through, they are put through or subjected to by society.
Right.
Hafiz has mentioned quite a number of them.
Mm.
And yes, I know the organizations that are actually working strongly to fight against the inhumane treatment widows face just because they've lost their husbands.
Right.
I mean, you sleep with your husband, you wake up and the man is dead, and then you're blamed for it, and
Mm.
you don't know how it happened.
Right.
You
Ok-
can't say anything about it, but then the whole situation has happened. Now,
Mm.
for widows, I mean, some of the key things some of them face and they look at is poverty. Poverty becomes a key issue, especially if the man
Mm.
was the breadwinner of the family.
Okay.
Some of them also have health issues
Mm.
because now it becomes difficult, especially if they are children. And if it's a family that you have like one woman with like 6 children,
Okay.
you have to care for all of them, and
Mm.
then the house, and you have to try and work extra jobs just to be able to get enough money to take care of them and yourself. Now, you tend to neglect your health
Mm-hmm.
because then the children become the most important ones,
Right.
and it's important to just make sure they are fine. So you don't really look after your health, and then you start suffering health conditions.
Mm.
Also, some of them actually do face violence in certain cases because in some of these communities, after all, who is going to come and fight me on your behalf? I mean, who are you going to report me to?
Right.
Who can you come and call to face me?
Mm.
So then it's like they've become subjected to, they become victims of such bouts of violence here and there.
Right.
And for some of them also, if they find themselves unfortunately in conflict related, I mean, scenarios, it becomes a big issue, a
Mm.
very big issue.
Okay, the show continues. Africa Daily, all the way to 3 p.m. GMT. We have 30 minutes to go. You're welcome to join us with your thoughts, comments, and contributions. If you know of any widow, maybe in your area, community, I mean, you can also share with us some of the things. I'm sure you might have seen a thing or two going on with them there, how they are struggling, thriving to provide. If they have more than one child and everything, it's a very, very difficult situation. Now, moving away from the have this conversation of even being blamed for the death of your husband and all of the, drama you have to go through just to prove your innocence. This is the case where I think our patriarchal society has also carved a certain dimension where even if the man is that rich and he passes away, maybe they might not blame you, but you sometimes don't get anything from the property that is being shared. What is happening here?
that's a whole other conversation. You see, and you're right. I mean, property seizures and evictions from
Mm.
homes are a very common story with widows. I mean, these are very all too common stories when widows narrate their experiences
Mm.
of of the stories or happenings long
Mm.
after their husbands are gone.
Okay.
And you see, the thing is, that's why a lot of women, when they get married,
Mm.
she is not at rest until she gives birth to a male child.
Mm.
Okay, so a lot of them, even when she's giving birth to, you know, children, and it's, we
There's
have,
no male
there's
kid
no
in there.
male kid in there, Charlie.
You're still vulnerable.
She's still on the edge because she knows she's still not out of the woodworks.
Mm.
Okay, she's still not out of the woods because anything could happen.
So
And what it means
does
is
that male child solidify your position in the house, or
absolutely,
it means
absolutely.
you get
Look, among the Balungu that I was talking about.
okay.
Okay, since they are in Cameroon, and customary law in there says that, look, if you have, say, land as a man,
Okay.
and you pass on, leaving a wife,
Mm-hmm.
the woman under that law only has user rights. She can use
She
it,
can't
but that's
own it.
She can own it
Whoa.
because under that law, she's also considered property.
Now that's a customary law.
Yes, and I'm telling you something. That's how bad it is.
Mm.
And no, and because she's considered property, property cannot inherit property.
She's considered as a property.
Yes, and so property can't inherit.
You got to
property.
be kidding me.
So the only way she
Tell me
stands
if
a
that
chance,
has changed, or it's still the same.
that's under the customary law here.
Wow.
So
Whoa.
the only way she gets a chance, a fighting chance, is if she has a son and
Who would inherit his
inherited, and
father?
she gets to inherit through proxy or by proxy, they say. Okay, because that's through her son.
Why are we
so
treating our women that way sometimes? Like, that's not fair.
you see, it's the culture and
It's the
tradition.
culture.
there.
Okay, okay,
Yes,
but
Okay.
okay.
So that is your only hope as a woman. Okay.
Wow.
Because the thing is,
wow.
properties are considered the sole preserve of sons. Daughters are considered strangers.
Because they would be married off
They were
eventually.
married off to another family,
get into
and they
another
become
family.
the problem of another family. So that is not.
And
their
when they get
business.
there, they don't give birth to a male son. They become another problem for them again.
I don't know
Why
if
is
you
this?
get it.
Good
So-
dear.
That's just so. That's the reality of it for them. So, but then since it's cultural,
Like
I
I
mean-
said, is it because of the patriarchal nature of most of the ethnic groups?
it's one. It's one. I mean, these are things that bind the people together.
Uh,
It's their way of doing things.
okay.
But then in tackling this, you can't just wake up and say, "Okay, stop it." You're going to face a lot of resistance
Bashing. Oh yeah.
because you can't wake up one day. Who are you to begin
Especially
with?
for those who have
Okay,
enjoyed it
it's,
for
it's something they've
that's
they are
passed on
accustomed
from
to.
generations
Exactly,
to
from
generations. So you
generations.
don't
So
just
it's not
wake up.
something you just wake up and say, "I'm banning it."
They will ban
there's-
you rather.
yeah. So there's a way around it
okay.
because I'm not saying they are children, but you know
Mm.
how when you want to take something from a child.
Mm.
Let's say a child is playing with a toy
Mm.
and you want to take it.
Yeah.
If you try to snatching it, they would cry.
Oh yeah.
So what do? You offer them something
Mm.
and then take what they have.
Right.
Not so. So I think it's in a similar approach.
Okay.
We are seeing organizations that are giving something
Mm-hmm.
in exchange for
something.
that, just take that away.
Okay.
So in certain cultures, for instance in Zimbabwe, where you had a woman that has to sleep with a stranger to prove her innocence, yes, they would rather you offer a bowl of water to indicate if indeed you stay in the family or leave altogether.
Okay. So
So instead of
we're looking at shifting away from that inhumane kind of thing
Yeah.
to a more appealing one by offering the bowl of water.
yes, so
Okay, that's okay. That's
to
good enough.
replace it with that.
That's good enough. No, that's good enough.
Oh, I
For me-
saw
I don't know. Right.
So, and in other cultures too, say in Sierra Leone, where it was mandatory for you to, to bath, the corpse
of your husband,
of a
your
husband,
deceased.
yes,
Mhm.
the deceased. Now, instead, because of Ebola and everything,
Mm.
so these days, you are supposed to wash stones instead.
Okay.
So we are seeing
There's-
a lot of them,
yeah.
give and
Just
take
trying to
happen
shift away
in some of
from-
the cultures.
Right.
And
Mm.
well, it's encouraging. Anyway.
Okay, Epifania, would you say the legal, what do you call it, practices in terms of the way some people do write their wills and everything, has also helped to a larger extent, hasn't it?
Helped in what extent?
And
In what
sharing of
way?
properties, at least, when you write a will, you spell out that this goes to your wife and this goes to this, and even with that, some
Yeah,
people
but-
still, find it difficult to accept that this amount of property is going to, the wife of the deceased. But anyway, let's hear.
Yeah, I think if you actually do have the opportunity, or the advantage to be able to actually write a will, and you have a lawyer
Right.
who will ensure,
Mm.
or you have people, custodians who will ensure that your will is going to be carried out after you're dead,
Okay.
then that is a good thing. But
Mm.
how many of these people do leave wills behind?
Oh, but I think there are people, and
I mean, then you're looking at
we know
those in
there
the
are people who do.
I know
who
there are people
writes
who leave, but
wills,
then
right?
oh yeah, I'm just saying how many of look at the rural areas where most of these things are predominant. How many
Mhm.
of them write wills?
Yeah, I think
How
No,
many of them
even
sit with?
even in our cities
It's
a big
it's
challenge.
rare.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
rare.
Oh, for the cities, I know the couple people do
But
it.
it's rare.
No, you see the
Hardly.
thing. Look,
Is
conversation surrounding death is never easy.
it?
Okay,
Mhm.
because look, how do you bring up that conversation with your husband at a dinner table and you're like, honey, so because you now have an estate, maybe
We should.
we should start drafting something up.
Yeah.
Some
Okay,
some would
Some would
be
explode
like,
on you.
what is going on? Are you
yeah.
planning on
me,
killing me?
For me, I don't think it's the women. For the will, I mean, if the
Yeah.
man actually has got all that, and the will is done between the man and his lawyer or his attorney,
Mhm.
most often the contents are kept sealed. The wife
Secret.
is not aware. The children, none of them are supposed to be aware of it. So he drafts it and puts it after his death.
But you
Yes,
know,
yeah.
That the lawyer
That's what I'm
comes
saying.
out
The
to put it
conversation
out.
even surrounding it, most men would probably be like and not tackle it. Now, for a
Mm.
woman that is worried, I'm just talking from the context of a woman that feels
It's
like
worried because anything can
be-
happen.
because she sees the happenings in the family
Mm.
and she decides to bring it up.
The way things are going, huh?
Of course,
Mm.
any man that probably hasn't thought about it some of them will be like, "Why do you intend on taking me somewhere or what?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Why are we having this conversation?" Because it's usually not a very easy conversation to have.
There's this
So-
wealthy senator. I think back when we were in Nigeria, he's from I think one of the Edo Ekiti states and all of that. Very rich man. We shared a wall.
Yeah.
And what happened was that he passed on, and guess what? This is a very well educated man, a doctor for that matter. Now when he passed on, he had 2 wives. Would you believe that? After sharing the property, after writing his will, none of the wives got none of the wives got even a single car. He had about 15 cars in that compound at that time. And the justification per, what are the conversations around was like, okay, per the traditions of where he's coming from, I don't know how true that is. It may be a rumor, but, one would say that there's some truth to some conversations. But, it's just like, okay, so for him, where he's coming from, you're not supposed to leave anything to the woman because
What? You see,
even when the law here is at play, where you have to sit with your lawyer and write a will. So has the cultural
very.
thing eaten that deep in
You see-
our doings?
for some of them,
Uh,
look, that's why as a man, if you have underlying conditions, let your relatives know about this, especially if you are aware of the culture you're coming from. Because one day you drop dead and your innocent wife is dragged left, right, and center because, hey, we don't understand our brother. He was
He was
alive.
never sick.
He was speaking to us yesterday. How come he's dead? And you don't even know a thing.
So you need to hear him choke before you approve that
So
he
if-
was
yes, so-
dying.
A lot of men aren't exactly also helping their wives in this regard
Mm.
because
Some of them
they
actually
keep
even keeping the sickness
they
away
keep-
from their wives.
they keep some of these things hidden, and when it blows up in their face,
And the women become the
They-
the victims here.
they become collateral damage
Unfortunately.
in the mess. Also, some of them even keep secret families. I'm sure I'm going to be stepping a lot of toes
yeah,
talking about this.
just
But
not to
it's the reason men die, and all of a sudden
People
you
start showing up.
realize you have a step brother or step sister somewhere that you didn't even know about.
She has arrived to take her share.
Because some way somehow his extracurricular activities yielded a child somewhere.
Mm.
So you have a brother or sister you don't know about,
Mm.
and these things. So when you bring up this conversation, of course he knows about another family he has somewhere, or he's keeping away from the public eye. You don't.
Right.
So you bring up this conversation, it's probably going to drag.
But all
because-
in all,
But-
I'd say kudos to every woman out there who's actually championing, in terms of making difference, making a change. Because I think sometimes, like, I don't know if you mentioned this whole idea, or Epi mentioned, it stems from, being coming from an impoverished family. You're poor. And you're not empowered. As a matter of fact, sometimes the system is not actually giving you the opportunity to be empowered. Like you said, you don't even You're a property. You're seen as a property. I mean, how can that system empower you to even own a land to maybe sell it out or cultivate, some crops there for business purposes? It doesn't give you that opportunity. So I think empowering our women is very, very necessary, because a woman who whose husband dies and she doesn't get a share of the property, that's one problem. Secondly, you're also being blamed elsewhere for the death of your husband. So you're kind of like it caught up in. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Sorry, I would
Yes.
say.
I read somewhere about how mostly in
Mm.
these things that we see regarding widows
Mm.
is actually a lot of women involved in the chain in terms of the victims and even the perpetrators.
Mm.
Yes, the way these things are carried out. You have a
Mm.
lot of the women go through some of these things, and they are the ones that are actually at the forefront of it. Carrying out some of these things. Because you see, a lot of the time you find a woman. Just even look at it around.
Yeah, they're the ones who come around and start pulling you around, and
You see,
you know.
look, just look at a woman that is struggling to have a child. Okay,
Mm.
and she gets into a slight misunderstanding with a
Our
fellow
fellow human, woman.
woman. A lot of the time, where's your child? Oh, it's more about shame,
Mm.
questioning your womanhood,
Mm.
or you discipline someone's son somewhere. Okay, it's
Mm.
like, oh, well, if you want to beat a child, why don't you have one for
One of
yourself,
your own.
one of your own,
Mm. Mm.
and then discipline that child the way you like. But before that, don't touch my child again. You see all these subtle jabs at them. So
Right.
these things go to reinforce certain notions in them.
Mm.
So a lot of the time, some of them would want to get married very young because of these things. Because she feels, well,
Regardless of the situation.
exactly.
let me
Because
just
when
get
she's
married.
young, she
Mm.
gets married.
Okay.
Okay, chances are if she's having just daughters
Mm.
at some point, her chances of having a male child at some point would increase.
Mm-hmm.
Then she can heave a sigh of relief and say,
Okay.
well, my place is now cemented
Mm.
in this family. And just even look at the way women are treated in most families.
Mm.
Okay, they are seen as strangers no matter how long they've been together.
Right.
When there's a misunderstanding,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's worsened even when you bring in family members to come into the situation to resolve it. Why? Because a lot of them, instead of dealing with this situation,
Mm.
they align with the person they are related to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you find that the
So
woman is
it's
not
you against us now.
exactly
Right.
and this is a woman that is far away from home.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody
Into
to run
an
to.
entirely different family.
Exactly. Hey, Charlie, marriage is something else,
So
the
the only person that acts as a buffer
Uh.
is her son.
Yeah, who could man up and stand for his mother?
Exactly.
What
In the midst of everything.
Yeah.
So I think one time we were having a conversation, you're asking me why would people hate? Why? I mean, sometimes just by the mere fact that you exist alone as a
Mm.
man, because
Yeah.
probably you are an impediment to someone else's
Someone else's agenda.
fortune.
Exactly.
I mean, if
yeah.
you're not around, he will be inheriting stuff.
Absolutely.
Now you are
absolutely.
here.
But I don't know. I wish we had a lawyer in our midst. But I would have, because I know in Western countries, I think the law to a larger extent protects women who lose their husbands. I don't know
Well,
if it's because of the way they have the. I don't know if because of the way the legal system works there, where most of the times, for instance, an example was given today where. They go and purchase a property together, and there's a write up to
Sign
who
contract
inherits
and
and this and
everything.
that. So at this instant, even if the husband's family wants to claim, the law says, "Hey, we are here. This is what is
It's not in Europe sometimes you watch videos of a man getting kicked out of a
his own house that he bought with his own money." So
Yeah,
I don't know. I want to believe.
in Europe and these other countries, it's a
Mm.
different ball game altogether. And I mean, I think times
But
have
shouldn't
changed
that
over
be
there.
the case also in some?
Even
I want to
in
believe
those systems too. I mean, they feel there are issues there.
there are pros and cons.
there are
Absolutely,
problems because,
absolutely.
I mean, we've seen instances where some women, because of the laws that that tend to favor them,
Mm.
they tend to have their way with it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've seen that in cases of say paying child support.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm.
Some just make it a business actually.
Yeah.
Okay. and all they do is just
You don't
they
pay, they
don't
take
even
you to
work. All
court.
they do, yes, they take it to
Yeah,
court.
I mean we've seen it.
Yes.
All these
Some,
celebs
yes,
being yeah.
they get pregnant
Drug.
for the well endowed in society and everything.
Mm.
I read about how this woman decided to, you know, a used condom by an athlete.
Mm.
Yes, used it, and I think got pregnant out of it, and then the guy has to pay for it because, well,
It's your child.
it's your child.
Oh dear.
So that is how the law
Yeah.
works for them.
Yeah,
for
but
them in certain
I
ways, and
want to believe in these parts there should be something in there that at least stands for the women. Or unless you go involuntarily to sign up for these things.
these days, I mean, of course, we don't have. It's not the customary laws that work. We
Uh-huh.
have the, I don't, the religion in itself. In some
Yeah.
communities,
Mhm,
yes, we
mhm.
find that some it's just the religion that takes care of some of these things. So if you're a Muslim, you're a Christian, based
There are
on
certain
the
doctrines,
certain guidelines of
Mm.
these religious,
Yeah.
religious provisions,
Mm.
they would share the properties according to that.
Right.
Because the little I know about Islam, they'll tell you that you don't even share your properties amongst. If it's your child,
Uh-huh.
you can't say you willed something to your child. By default, once you give the child owns something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so because there are instances where some decide to ignore their children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So you own the property? You do?
that
Really?
question came out of nowhere. I don't have a
Right,
conversation with
right. But I also want to. I think there are other support groups as well who give helping hands to widows, women who are very
But this
vulnerable.
is
They don't.
over here. There's legal aid and everything.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
for those that have.
I think we've come a long way, from but there's still that elements of the core of our grandfathers and us. Hey, my friend, keep quiet. We're talking about the ones here. But I think it's a very important day. But I still insist that empowering our women, single or married, is very very necessary. Is very very necessary. Let me pick final words from Epi and then you, so we can wrap up. Epi.
Yeah, I think we should keep supporting the works of organizations that are standing up against the treatment of widows.
Okay. Avis.
Yes, quickly,
Mm.
like you mentioned, it's about empowerment, and more often than not, a lot of these things happen because women aren't financially sufficient.
Okay.
Yes, they are largely dependent on their husbands.
Right.
So if we create an avenue where you have women doing stuff on their own, financially independent, a lot of the time these things will not happen. If it comes down to having to, go at it with family members just so you can secure certain properties, a lot of them, when they look at the pros and cons and they have a lot going on for them personally on the financial level, they probably would not even bother asking about these things and
Yeah,
creating a lot of
yeah.
problems, and then they probably would move on with their children and have a decent life
Okay.
regardless.
Mm.
So I think largely it's about control of the financial resources basically.
Generally.
Yes, which sort of places it in the hands of men
Okay. Than
per the
women.
system that we
Mm,
have
mm.
these days.
All right, thank you. The show was Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. That's what we have for our discussion zone today. But later, if you listen to the show on demand, you can leave a comment on the Facebook Africa Global Radio or on Twitter AF Global Radio. Use the hashtag the Africa Daily Show or through our WhatsApp number +233 207064 680.
Enjoy the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.